Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay. Never comes again, another day like yesterday. Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.
Hi, everybody. Wife's been sick, daughter's been sick. I was sick for a minute. So I look pretty tired, but whatever. And my voice is weird. I'm definitely not sick. I've been over it for about 3 days, but it fried my voice and I may be on the way to losing it, or maybe not. Maybe I'm coming back from it. Anyway, my last podcast was about how everyone who comes into therapy is working on dysregulation, which is either a cause of or a result of or somehow some component of judgment. Because everyone who comes into therapy is working on judgment of other people, judgment of self. And another component of that is that everyone who comes into therapy is working on the fact that they've had so many false experiences or experiences that taught them that something that wasn't true about them or about other people, that everyone who comes into therapy essentially is working on reality testing or working on the fact that they have a perception about themselves or other people that is not just a little bit askew, but is extremely erroneous. And so this was baked into my last podcast episode. And the more I think on it, and the more I think about it, and the more I explain it to myself and to other people, I realize there's so many ways to say that and see that. But if you say it, if it's too cryptic, it really kind of doesn't resonate. It's like, what does that mean? Like, that sounds maybe philosophical and clever, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it sounds stupid. So I thought I would take another run at that core, that kernel, because I think it's actually incredibly important. I think it is maybe the primal or the first experience of the human condition, the suffering that's in the human condition. So I'm going to take a run at this without all of the other preamble and all the other conversation about just that core of how A, judgment of others is judgment of self. B, how judgment of others and judgment of self is actually dysregulation. It is being in a state of dysregulation that inspires us to judge others and to judge self. Judging others and judging self is inherently dysregulating. And underneath all of it, or maybe as a part of the triad of the human condition, a lack of true reality testing or believing and maintaining things that are not true about other people, and believing and maintaining things that are not true about you, is by definition judgment. When we talk about judgment that's with resentment and frustration and shame, etc., these things only result from a misperception of self or a misperception of other people. And the argument that I'm making is that when you, as accurately as possible, perceive who someone else is, at the very least, you will no longer feel the desire to judge them. You may feel empathy, you may feel sympathy, you may deeply disagree with their behavior, but you'll go, oh man, like, I don't see how they could have ended up any other way. Like, that, in fact, the way they ended up demonstrates resiliency, and in the end, you may find them to be a beautiful conscious being, a beautiful presentation of consciousness within whatever this is. Same applies to self. So let's start again with separation from truth and how that results in judgment of others, judgment of self, and then dysregulation. How those are all basically a triad of the same thing, whatever that thing is. I think it's a separation from truth. Let's take a fish. Fish swims in water. Fish is very adept swimming in water. A fish maybe doesn't even understand not water. A fish is so deeply wedded to the experience of water and built for water. And then there are monkeys, maybe really good at climbing in trees. Maybe wouldn't do so well in water. Maybe if a monkey got dragged to the bottom of the ocean by a fish and held there for 10 minutes, we know that would not work well. And we know that if the monkey dragged a fish up a tree and held it there for 10 minutes, that would not work out well. What do you think the monkey thinks of the fish? It may have some perception that there is a thing called a fish. There probably isn't any judgment. You can perceive that a thing is. You can perceive that a thing is different without any judgment, because, and this is the argument I was making last time. Well, before I get to that, let me continue with the thought experiment. What do you think the fish thinks of the monkey? Maybe it perceives that the monkey exists. Maybe it can see the monkey swinging in the trees, and maybe sometimes the monkey swims in the water briefly. Maybe sometimes the fish leaps out of the water and breaches and then falls back in. Maybe they're able to perceive each other. They have no judgment. They just see a thing that seems to present as alive and acts and behaves and moves through a medium that's entirely different. Let's say there's a kind of monkey that fishes. It eats fish. And let's say there's a kind of fish that's poisonous to a monkey. Maybe it has spines on its back that if a monkey grabs it, the monkey's going to die. Do you think the monkey goes around going, what kind of bullshit is this? Like, what kind of shitty animal grows spine? Like, that's just immoral. Actually, I have a religion. I have a monkey religion. And my God says that fish are evil and that I have a right to kill them. You think that the monkey has a judgment, that kind of resentful, angry, rejecting judgment, like this fish shouldn't exist? Even if that monkey attempts to capture the fish and gets stuck by a spine and maybe there's some kind of neurotoxin and it dies very quickly, it may deeply, deeply dislike that experience. My guess is it probably has no judgment. It doesn't judge the fish. It doesn't have a moral opinion of the fish. Vice versa. If this monkey pulls the fish out, that fish might fight as hard as it can to get back in the water. It may dislike the experience. It might experience fear, et cetera, et cetera. My guess is it doesn't know what to think of the monkey. It doesn't have an opinion about the monkey. Here's the argument I'm making. And in the episode I did before, I used the thought experiment of an incredibly resilient rock that cannot be impacted by anything else, anything in the universe, interwoven by an impervious metal. And so this rock happens to have consciousness, and you can throw that rock into the middle of the sun and the rock is like, cool, whatever. You can run over that rock with a bulldozer and the rock is like, cool, whatever. You can sink it to the bottom of the ocean. The rock is like, cool, whatever. The point of these thought experiments is to show you that judgment, and when I say judgment, I don't mean like, oh, I judge that the roads are too icy, I think I should probably not drive on them. That's discernment, or that's a judgment that is not really about moral. It's not a resistance of what's true, right? It's not like, well, this shouldn't be true. This thing should not happen. I'm talking about resentful, angry judgment that is a rejection of what is. You can see that judgment comes from two things. One, that my form, the form of my personality, the form of my presence, the form of my biological limitations in this reality are the birthplace of judgment. because my ability to be hurt, by things is where I start to judge. But you take the example of the monkey and the fish. I'm projecting what I think they think, but I believe that this is accurate, that they don't have a judgment of one another. Maybe they do, but so you can even be hurt by things. And if you don't have moral opinions, if you don't have expectations, if you don't apply expectations, then you don't end up doing the suffering that comes from all of that moral judgment of like, well, that's just shitty and we should put an end to this kind of animal. And, why would that happen? Why would a just God ever allow such a thing? All these things that we do inside that create a very negative, dysregulated environment come from a rejection of what's true, especially when what's true hurts us. So I went over, this is why the first problem is a separation from what's true. I start pretending that I have a right to expect something other than the truth. And when I'm doing that, I'm actually pretending that this other thing is true. You see people do this all the time. This is baked into the statement of like, oh my God. Like I remember when it was year 2000. Oh my God, I can't believe it. This is like 2000. People still think that way. Now it's like, oh, this is 2020. People this is 2024. People still think that way. Yeah, they never stopped thinking that way. We created a separation from reality. We pretended that something was true, and we did it because we were scared. We pretended we were more advanced. We pretended that life involved less pain, less injustice, less ignorance, less cruelty. We pretended that that was true so that we could be in denial and exist in some state where we felt like we had control over how dangerous life was. And then when life showed up and was like, what you think is bullshit, I don't care what you think, I am still what I am, we then suffer and we struggle and we fight and we get super, super judgmental. Now, this is the point at which where I talk to you about the separation from what's true. The expectations are what creates the judgment. So judgment really is a symptom of the fact that you're already suffering this disjointed, disconnected existence in which you're trying to pretend something is true that isn't, and you're trying to pretend that what is true isn't. And the human spirit or the human brain, humans do not do well with this. Separation from truth does not do well. It is inherently dysregulating. My argument is that the act of creating a false reality and maintaining it in the face of all the signals that come from what's true is dysregulation. That the act of doing that dysregulates us. We think, oh, I'm dysregulated because, people should be this way, and then they show up this way, and they're just terrible, and I'm feeling dysregulated and triggered because, people are just shitty. But the truth is our dysregulation is created by the act of pretending that something false is true. All the energy that it takes to construct a false reality in the face of what's true and to maintain that, which is very dangerous to us, is inherently dysregulating. And we experience dysregulation. And then people show up the way they actually are, and we go, they triggered me. No, they didn't. They just proved to you what a precarious position you were in. All they did was take this shaky, false, delusional platform that you're pretending to stand on, and they just went and dink, and they just showed you that it was nothing. It didn't exist. It was never a place to stand. And then we're like, I feel terrible because they're bad people. Maybe they're bad people. I don't know. Like, people do shit that I consider bad, for sure. For sure. Like, that's unshakable. Like child harming children or molesting or her, like, I can't, I have no way of navigating around it. I just think it's horrible, and I think they're bad people, and that doesn't fit with my philosophy. Well, it doesn't fit with this mental model, right? That I shouldn't be in judgment. I should just accept that that's who that person is and not pretend that it's not true. But I have a hard time with that. So I'm not saying this from a place of like, oh, I have this all stitched up. I don't. I'm just talking to you about what logically appears to be true. Psychologically, what appears to be true. That you take a separation from what is true, whether it's painful, ugly, pretty, like whatever it is, that we construct some false reality, which is inherently dysregulating. The construction of it dysregulates us. The attempt to maintain it dysregulates us. And then reality comes and goes, pss, pss, hey, by the way, you're full of crap. We're like, oh my God, you triggered me. You triggered me. I'm so dysregulated right now. No. You dysregulated yourself by constructing a lie and trying to maintain the lie. Now, I want to soften this message the way I did in the previous podcast in dealing with this, because it sounds like you're blaming the victim. I don't want to blame the victim. I don't want to blame me. There have been people who have done really, really unjust things that I didn't deserve. And there are other people that have had terrible things happen to them that they didn't deserve. And there are people that I did unfair things to them that they didn't deserve. I'm not judging the person who suffers. I want you to know structurally, within logic and reason, with however this works, that however painful what true is, if you stop having an opinion about it and just go, oh, that's true, and decide how you're going to respond to it in the way that's most healthy for you, the dysregulation ceases. And I'm not just saying this in J.S. Wonders, this way of just like thinking through these philosophical things. I'm telling you, in my own work and as a therapist, I see this happen over and over and over. I think I used the example of, my parents had done some really unsavory things, especially my mother had done some really unsavory things to me. And I spent years pathologizing them and really angry and thinking through how sick they were and diagnosing them and blah, and morally judging them and blah, blah, blah. And maybe they deserve that. I don't know. It's not my opinion. It's not my business. But I can tell you none of that helped very much, other than to momentarily vent some anger or feel justified anger. None of it helped very much. And the reason was because it was still a separation from what was true. I was hiding a painful truth from myself that I couldn't reconcile with, right? So you want to know how this works? Underneath things that certainly if I told you, you would go, oh my God, yes, that's terrible. Like that was certainly child abuse and nobody would blame you for being angry. And yeah, that's pretty clear. Underneath that drama was the fact that they were okay and were always okay with not really having much connection to me. And once I decided to separate from them, though they made demonstrations to my brothers and sisters, there was not a single real attempt to repair the relationship, because it was more comfortable for them. It was easier for them. And that was always true in my entire childhood. It was always easier for them if I went away. That was always a more comfortable solution. And I couldn't handle that. There was too much grief and sadness to go, stop pathologizing, stop accusing, stop judging, and understand that you are not wanted the way you want. No judgment. Don't judge it. Don't have an opinion about it. That's just a fact. That just showed up over and over and over and over. You are not wanted the way you wanted. And that was very painful. Now, if I really knew everything that was going on, maybe I wouldn't even think that was painful. Maybe I'd go like, maybe there was no other way that could turn out. Maybe it had nothing to do with me or them or any, like who, like, I don't know. So my point is, there was an enormous amount of energy that I was investing into understanding them, but it was really judging and punishing them in my head. I was judging them and punishing them. And I was incredibly dysregulated that entire time. When I just accepted and mourned, I'm not wanted. I don't know why. I don't know why it was okay to let go of me, but it was. Once I accepted I am not wanted the way I wanted, I am not attached. There's not an attachment there that I wanted to be there. Peace came. A lot of dysregulation came. A lot of regulation came. Peace came. It was really part of a real healing journey of going from severe dysregulation to regulation, to no resiliency to lots of resiliency. So I'm giving you, right, an example, a personal example where the separation from the truth, the resistance of the truth was the dysregulation. So I'm giving this to you to tell you that I'm a human being. I'm deeply invested in wanting things to be fair for me and wanting people to understand that what happened was unfair. And I don't blame me. I don't want to blame me. I don't want to feel like someone saying, oh, it was your fault. PTSD was your fault. But I'm telling you that it's an irresistible truth that an enormous amount of dysregulation that happened during that period came because I kept trying to force something to be true that was just simply not true. I don't need to understand why. I don't need to explain it. I don't need to go back into the family history. I don't need to go into epigenetics and generational. Like, you can do it if it helps you. I'm a therapist. I do it all the time. Do it if it helps you. But in the end, so much of it is dysregulating because we're doing it to resist what's true. We're doing it to try to find a way to explain something that's extremely painful that we don't want to admit that's true. And I see this in my practice so often. I see people just jumping through psychological hoops and they've learned all of the language and, well, this and that, and they're angry and they're hurt, and which is legit, but at the same time, they're like, well, you know, but do I understand what my mom went through and this and that, and she has her personality. Well, dad was pretty mean to her and this and that, and they just going through all of these mental, intellectual, psychological gyrations. And in the end, what it really comes down to is if their parent wanted a close relationship to them, they fucking well would have one. They would. And, you know, modern humans are constantly going around making excuses. Well, if you understood, no. People are doing what they want to do. We might not like to hear that, but they are. People are doing what they want to do. So come back to, again, I was that client, and then there are people like that who are doing all these mental gyrations and, you know, thinking through everything and then trying to prove how empathetic they are, that they really understand their parent, and then they try to take that to the parent and they try to connect, and then they get hurt again, blah, blah, blah. Because if you don't have an emotional investment and you're just sitting there watching that, you already know it's like, no, that parent really, they're either afraid of something or what, but they're okay. Like they don't want to be connected. They don't. And I had a problem accepting that. It was difficult to accept that. And I see people for whom that's the case. So let's bring this evidence back to when I use these sort of this philosophical way of looking at it, where it's like, well, a separation from what's true is a dysregulating. This is what I mean but in every facet, not just psychology, but in every facet of reality. Separation from the truth. And in order to separate from the truth, we must create judgment. Judgment is the act of creating a delusion and then being pissed that reality shows up and our delusion, poof, falls apart. And we're like, you're a horrible person. Well, no, what that person did was just show up and pop this illusory bubble that you created around yourself to pretend that something that was true wasn't true, was true. Right? For me, I was lucky. I had a very, very good therapist who really stood by me and was really, really helpful. And I was able to work through and at some point come to accept that maybe I'll never truly understand what my parents went through and et cetera, and whatever. It's not my job to understand. It's my job to stop constructing a reality that's going to dysregulate me so that I get surprised over and over and over by something not showing up that had never been there. It had never been there. For real, I don't know why, it just wasn't. I could sit here and spend the rest of my life theorizing and talking to a therapist about why it was okay for them to do what they did. Who cares? Like, no, I mean, yes, care, but it doesn't help me. It just dysregulates me. Separation from the truth. The act of constructing a delusion is an act of judgment. Judgment is an expression of dysregulation, is an expression of separation from truth. This is where these things are, they are the same animal. They are the same animal. They're the same thing. They're parts of the same thing. I separate from myself from the truth. You'll see how this cycles and it becomes confusing, right? I separate from myself from the truth, and I construct a delusion about what's true, and that is a dysregulating act. Judgment is an expression of dysregulation. Dysregulation is an expression of judgment, and both of them are an expression of separating from the truth. But here's where it gets confusing. What's the chicken or the egg? Why would someone separate from the truth? The monkey doesn't separate from the truth. If the monkey gets pulled under the water by the fish, the monkey will fight with everything it has to get back to life and living, but it doesn't have an opinion about what's happening. So it doesn't suffer that expectation. The monkey's not sitting there going like, oh my God, what kind of animal is this? Like, so entitled, right? That's not what's happening. Why does someone separate from the truth? They separate from the truth because they have already constructed a judgment. The monkey doesn't separate from the truth. The monkey is like, oh shit, I'm drowning. That is 1,000% what's happening right now. And if I don't figure out something to do about it right now, it's going to happen and then I'm going to die. And it's painful and it's scary. That's it. There's pain in life and there's fear in life. That's not the same thing as suffering. Suffering comes when we start judging, separating from the truth. And again, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Why does someone separate from the truth? Because judgment has already been handed to them. Delusions have already been handed to them. This is what the human race does since time immemorial. You're born and you pop out. You have no opinions about stuff. You're the same as the monkey or the fish. Things might be painful, things might be unwanted, things might be pleasant, whatever it is, you don't have a moral opinion about it, you don't have a judgment about it, you just experience it and you attempt to avoid the things that hurt and you attempt to increase the things that are pleasant. But then there are other people who have had judgments put on them and they've been taught by society and religion and morality and all of these things to have an opinion that it should be some way or it should not be some way. And by the way, if you want more anecdotal evidence that this system is true, what I'm talking about is a true model of reality and mental health. The more shoulds, should nots, must, have to there is in anybody's vocabulary, the more neurotic and more mental health issues they have. End of story. It is a correlation. It is a correlate. It is a correlate. The more shoulds and should have for other people or self, the more you must do this, or you have to, like everybody knows what kind of person doesn't blow up. The more there is of that, the more neurotic, the more dysregulation, and the less resilient and less functional a person is. That is a direct correlation. Every single therapist can tell you that. If you watch the level of expectation and judgment, the more intense the expectation and judgment, the closer you get to personality disorders. So why does someone separate from the truth? Chicken or the egg, which came first? Well, because they have already had judgment imposed on them. Let's say you're the kind of animal, okay, let's say I'm the kind of animal I am. I'm pretty sure I was born very, very introverted. Very sensitive nervous system to loud sounds, lots of people. I was a musician. I love music. It was the obsession of my life. I went to 2 concerts my entire childhood, and that has continued because they were so loud it was physically painful. It felt like someone was stabbing knives into my ears, and it felt like someone was electrocuting my nervous system. I would have to fight with everything I had to just stay at a concert and pretend that I was even having fun. It was horrible. I still hardly ever go if it's going to be very loud. Okay, so I was born introverted. If I had come out, I probably would have had uncomfortable experiences and comfortable experiences, but I probably would have felt very, very entitled to just fight to be the kind of animal I was. For people, I used this example last time, for people who like raves, I don't have a judgment of you. I love you. You're great. But if you want me to go fuck yourself. I'm a different kind of animal. I will not enjoy that rave. I will not. If you want to invite me to dinner, have a couple glasses of wine and shoot the shit, and you feel like talking about philosophy, the human condition, or something intellectual, oh my God, I'm in heaven. Let's do that. Or if you want to go mountain biking, whatever. I'm that kind of animal. If I had been allowed to just be that kind of animal and advocate for myself and fight for what worked for me and not be judged and have judgments imposed, shame, humiliation, why are you this? Well, you're too this, you're too that, blah, blah, blah. I would have learned the truth of who I am, what the limits of my personality and my biology is, and it just is what it is. It doesn't mean that you don't suffer or struggle in life. It's just you don't have the suffering that comes from judgment, right? So then we begin separating from truth. Someone tells us, this is your reality, but it's a bad thing, and you should try for it to not be true. And then you go, okay, well, I believe you because you're bigger than me and you have influence over me, and I want you to love me. So I'm going to construct this false reality. So you start with, okay, so I'm doing it, right? I'm saying you start with judgment and then you get separation from truth. But separation from truth results in judgment, or is the same thing as judgment. And both of those things dysregulate, or the act of self-dysregulation requires separation from truth. The act of generating judgment, which is judgment is supporting a delusion, dysregulation is already built in. So you see why I chose to do a follow-up podcast on the subject, because there's something mysterious about whatever this is. The way we suffer, and of course the Buddhists and the Hindus have been talking about this. I don't think I'm saying anything new for them. Right? They talk about, the source of suffering. Life is full of pain, but the source of suffering is our expectation, is our refusal to just accept what is true is true. What has happened has happened. What is happening is happening. It might be painful, but it doesn't have to be full of suffering and the misery and the judgment and the fighting inside of our head. But like, why does it have to be there? And what if I did this? And like all this judgment, like I'm a bad person because it happened to me and I wasn't strong enough, or they're a bad person for doing it, or some version of both. That is inherently a separation from the truth. Whatever you are doesn't work well without whatever that is. And whatever that is just is what it is. There's nothing to judge about it. It's a fact that exists. The best way to navigate life is just to accept that it's true. And if you find yourself in judgment and dysregulating and struggling, you need to understand that working on changing that external situation usually is still based in judgment, which only dysregulates you and hurts you. The only healthy thing to do is to look at myself and go, what delusion am I trying to support? Right? In my case, what delusion was I trying to support? There were so many layers. There was a layer of, I'm not lovable if my parents can't love me in the way that I love them. If they can't connect to me the way I want to be connected, like that means something about me, that means something like, so judgment was already in there. So then I constructed all this massive psychological bullshit about what they were raised with and what their diagnosis was and what mine was and why, you know, but maybe it's their fault, maybe it's not their fault. All of that bullshit was further dysregulating. When the truth is, if I stopped judging myself and just went, well, you're a person who likes deep connection, deep, quiet, profound connection, and you like to do it very carefully, a person here, a person there, and it's boring for you when it's very surface and very frantic and active, that's meaningless to you, so, you know, whatever. So there are going to be animals like that. They're not your kind of animal. For whatever happened with your parents, just accept that the connection you want doesn't exist. And you're hurting yourself, you're dysregulating yourself, right? So I couldn't change what the dynamic was. Analyzing it and whatever, however smart or insightful it was, didn't help my dysregulation, because all of that supposedly what might look like healthy exploration and, you know, et cetera, was me refusing to accept the painful truth that they did not want what I wanted. They were not going to offer me what I wanted to offer them. Don't understand it. But then there were the deeper judgments. Well, if that's true, then I'm not lovable. I'm not wantable. And there's the deeper judgment of like, well, part of the reason you want them to want you is because that's what teaches you to want yourself. Oh, maybe it's a lot harder, but maybe I should just want myself. And then that becomes irrelevant. So then there was a deeper truth of, well, however it occurred, certainly childhood abuse can do it. Maybe I was born, like, who knows? I certainly didn't want myself. I didn't value myself as a living, conscious being. So how do I pull this together, right? I mean, there's so many ways to describe it, but I wanted to re-explore the mystery of whatever this thing is. Separation from truth is inspired by delusions. Delusions are judgments. When we judge that something should be other than what it is, then we construct an illusion. Constructing an illusion and attempting to pretend that it's true in the face of reality that can be painful or dangerous is inherently dysregulating and dysregulated. So then we go, oh, because the world is such a shitty place, I'm triggered and dysregulated. No, you're triggered and dysregulated because you were trying to pretend that what's true isn't. And if you accept what's true, however painful and sad it might be, that the world is full of rape and theft and people intentionally doing things just to make money that leaves children to starve. Like, this is a fact of the human race. There's as much that in the human race and human condition as there is people being nice to each other. This is a fact. If you will stop trying to construct a delusion, you might feel sad, you might grieve what the human condition is, but you will experience peace. And when you accept that and accept peace, you may get to know yourself. You may stop having judgments and delusions about yourself. And you may realize, wow, in such a painful, difficult, unpredictable world, but also a beautiful world, I'm actually a beautiful, beautiful presence. Me being here is against astronomical odds, and surviving day to day and being a decent person. And suddenly you might actually find yourself inspired to be kind, to be like, yeah, there might be a lot of that out there, but starting right here with me, I'm going to pray to, devote myself to love, generosity, beauty, kindness in the face of misery. And not to support some delusion, about me, that I'm not a human animal and that I don't have the potential to behave in a really shitty way on some given day. Don't go back to delusion. Don't separate from truth. Just go, oh, wow. The fact that it's this is actually amazing and beautiful. The fact that I'm here and I'm conscious and I can look and I can see these things and I can just go, oh, I can see what's true. What's true presents itself. It's true. It's, guys, when you stop playing head games with yourself, what's true isn't confusing. It's mind-boggling. It's screaming. The truth screams at you. It requires an enormous amount of mental gymnastics to bullshit yourself into some delusion of the state of the human race or the state of life or the human condition or the condition of anything. A client in the last year turned me on to a book called The Life of Trees. I love trees. I'm in love with trees. I love trees so much. And I wanted to read it and believe that trees had this serene, beautiful, almost spiritual existence. No! They're living in the same thing the rest of us are. Struggle, sometimes desperate struggle to stay alive. And they do beautiful, interesting things. Like when one of their species or one of their family is cut down, trees will funnel sugar through their root network and through mycelium network to feed that stump and keep it in some kind of state of life. This is amazing. This is what I'm talking about. When you stop playing games and just accept the truth against the backdrop of all the pain and suffering and life-consuming life, you realize, wow, there's something else at work here, and it's called love. And it's fucking amazing that it exists in this thing. If you will stop the mental gymnastics, stop separating from truth by using judgment and by being in a state of judgment and then dysregulating yourself. And then when you're dysregulated, you can't really perceive truth very well because you're bullshitting yourself, and also your nervous system is fried and your brain is fried and blah, blah, blah. The whole system is a mess and it doesn't work and it will never work. It's based on fear. And it tries to prove itself. It just cycles. It goes, well, if you did this and you got control of this, then you wouldn't be afraid. And then you try to do it, but then you find you don't have control of that. So then you're really afraid. And then you're like, well, I need to do this and control this to do it. There's no end. If you let fear drive you, you're done. You will suffer your entire life. If you will accept, when I say accept, people almost think morally that you're somehow causing it. There's a very primitive, silly perception. And I sympathize. I struggle with the same thing. I try to practice what I preach, right? And go, okay, It's a fact since the beginning of time, there have been people that I would call parasites or predators who are sexually attracted to children, and they will hurt them horribly, terribly, even a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old. And it just destroys my stomach to go, I'm not causing this, but I have to accept that this is a fact. It's true. It's part of the human condition. You can call it an aberration. You can say they're mentally ill. Like, you can say anything you want, but it's true. It has always existed, and it still exists. It's a part of the human condition. Sure, I have an opinion about it. But what's the point in judging it? It just dysregulates me. So I understand like the implications of using the word accept. Maybe we need a different word. Don't accept what's true as and take it into you and just be okay with it. That's not what that means. Accepting what's true means with clear vision, unobscured by judgment or resistance, with clear vision going, reality has presented itself and I acknowledge reality. Reality is real, it's true. I'm this little tiny meaningless organism. I don't have any power over any of it. When reality presents itself as real, okay. I'm not accepting it. I'm not making it true. I'm not signing off on pedophiles. But if I want any chance of being able to respond in a healthy way for myself and my family, being able to have every ounce of energy, psychological energy, and to use everything at my wherewithal within my personality and my coping skills and my resiliency and my personality and my brain, everything in order to protect myself and my family to have a more beautiful life, I can't do it by pretending and clouding my own judgment and my own perception with bullshit resistance and constructing some delusion and trying to maintain that to make myself feel safe because I'm actually afraid. Fear does not help you with the exception of in the moment. If you're on the savannah in Africa and you get lost from your safari and you're trying to walk to find your way and a lion charges you, be afraid. It's the best chance you have. The adrenaline and cortisol, you're done. But let's pretend you have a chance. You're done. But let's pretend you have a chance. Fear, adrenaline and cortisol is the best chance you have of just some miraculous thing happening and you not dying. Humans we are so weak compared to animals. I think we forget it when we live in cities or whatever. We forget how immensely physically powerful and resilient animals are. That's the place for fear. There is no other place anywhere else. All it does is obscure, and this is coming from someone who feels plenty of fear. So rather than the word accept, just acknowledge, just keep your view clear. As a perceiving, conscious, living being, keep your view as clear as possible of what's true. Do not resist, do not fight, do not construct illusions, do not judge. Those are acts of obscuring reality from us, pretending that it should be some other way. Based on what? Based on what? You think you or any society is God and went, we're going to abolish it? No, you didn't. You can make things slightly better. I'm not saying don't work to make things better. I'm just saying stop playing. Stop playing games. Stop deluding yourself. Me too. John, stop deluding yourself. Just acknowledge when reality comes in, it's screamingly obvious in these really, really important ways. It's just raging the truth at us. And it takes an enormous amount of work to ignore it and to construct a delusion. And then that dysregulates us and that makes us vulnerable. I have no idea if I got to a point or if I reinforced, but I was trying to take the mystery of whatever that thing is. It is core to the human condition. We either judge, construct delusions, separate ourselves from truth and reality, which is terribly dysregulating and further blinds us to be able to navigate anything and respond to anything. And then we live in misery, and like if you take that far enough, you get personality disorders, you get people who are just not okay. Other humans have to support them and take care of them. And the closer you get to just accepting what's true, the more mental health issues go away. The more stable you are, the more resilient you are, the more bandwidth you have to respond to whatever it is that life presents you. Whatever the truth is that comes. I'm going to go one step further just to leave you on something. The more I attempt to just acknowledge what's true, accept it. Don't fight, don't judge, don't, well, should, and why isn't that, and why don't people, and I can't believe people, blah, 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 blah. Which is just dysregulating and obscures my own vision. Burns up my bandwidth so I can't protect myself and my family and my kids. And I can't build our lives into better. But here's what's important. The more I just accept and clear my vision and just go, let what's true present itself as true, the more it becomes apparent that the only thing that enables you to respond with true creativity, true flexibility, true resiliency to make all of this be better, that enables you to create things that are better, that mitigate suffering or eliminate suffering, things that create connection and things that make things better for your family and also for other people. The only thing that keeps showing up, I can't prove to you that it's true, but the only thing that keeps showing up is love. And I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm not talking about, lust and that's great, awesome, great, big part of life. I'm married. Maybe I would enjoy my life less if I didn't have those things. I don't know. This is a love that comes with an inner state of joy, profound pleasure that I'm conscious and alive, that knowing how unlikely this is. And knowing that the more I engender and embody that state of love, not romantic love, but just an acceptance of what is, and just going, yeah, but it's just amazing that I'm here. You begin to look at other people and other things with love, even painful and difficult things. I think I shared in a past podcast about an unhinged homeless person who I could tell was aggressive, was struggling with stability. And when I stepped up on the curb, I wasn't anywhere close to him, but he was attempting to sort of walk towards the edge of the curb as I stepped up. And from his perspective, it probably felt like, and this happens a lot for people with PTSD, it felt like an intrusion. And he had this staff, this stick with an iron tip on it, and he slammed it on the sidewalk. I was like, get out of my way. But then he kind of turned away and blah, blah, blah. And I was very triggered me, and I'm a guy. So I have an instant animal response of I will beat the thing. Maybe I won't, maybe he'll beat but it's just my animal response as a male. But I was super happy that in the 30 seconds it took me to walk from there into my office, my brain had recognized the truth. That had nothing to do with me. I don't need to fight that guy. Whatever he has been through has slammed him into fight or flight so often and so deeply with no chance to recover from it and no chance to develop resiliency. and I know this from having had chronic PTSD myself, that you come a point where even a loud noise, even someone dropping something near you makes you feel violent, as if you have been stabbed or hit, or someone is electrocuting you. And it happens over and over and over. And sometimes you just get to the point where you're like, the next car that honks at me, I'm going to get out of the car and I'm going to beat the fuck out of that person. I understand that because I lived in it for decades. And I'm so thankful in that case that I was able to just see. Okay, I had my biological response, but I could just see. And by the time I got back to my office, I could feel empathy and even love for that guy. Because I did not live through what he lived through, I promise you. Or I would have been the one on the corner. Because he's special. He is important. He is worthy of love. The only reason he's the guy on the corner, unhoused, and with such severe chronic PTSD that he cannot handle someone even walking in his direction, is not because he's less than me or you. It's because he has lived through shit most of us cannot imagine. And then you can feel love. And when you do, you become more powerful and more flexible. So that weird triad, judgment, separation from truth. The interesting thing about it is what it truly does is it separates you from a state of love. So my working theory is that consciousness is love. Consciousness is inextricable from love. And that whatever that other weird, mysterious thing is, it is the function of fear, which is a separation from love. It's a separation from consciousness. And you can see that's built into it. If you're building a delusion, you're not conscious. Consciousness, by definition, must be aware of what's true. When you separate from truth, you are separating from consciousness. You are becoming unconscious, which is inherently dysregulating. So then if my working theory is correct, that consciousness is inextricable from a love, a profound state of love for self and others, then of course, separating from truth is also separating from love. Separating from truth is separating from consciousness, is separating from love. So then you get back to John Lennon. All you need is love. I'm not saying this from some woo-woo bullshit. I'm saying this as a hyper rigidly intellectual, philosophical, cynical, critical person who tore down every belief system I ever came across. I worked it until I found its bullshit because I didn't want to believe anything. I was so disillusioned and cynical. And once I stopped supporting delusions and generating all the separation and generating the delusions and being in judgment and being disregulated, once I stopped doing that, certain truths seemed to keep presenting themselves. And one of those truths is, it seems like love is consciousness. It seems like consciousness is love. That seems irrefutable. Because when you inhabit consciousness and you stop throwing up this fearful smokescreen in an attempt to control reality, you stop separating from consciousness, you inhabit a state of love. Again, go back to the example. The gentleman on the corner. When I deluded myself that he was a threat and that I had to respond as a male and kick somebody's ass, or maybe not, maybe he would have kicked my ass. And I had to make him somebody that was a threat to me. That's not what's true. That's a separation from truth. I promise you that if I knew his whole life, I would bawl my fucking head off. And I would say, man, I would volunteer to get the shit kicked out of me by that dude, because he is there on the corner, unhoused and psychologically unstable, and any intrusion into his space is massively painful and feels so threatening that he responds in almost an animal. And by the way, notice that he curtailed and pulled in his own response. He slammed his staff down, but he kind of turned away and then was like, without looking directly at me, was like, get the fuck away from me. He tried to contain the violence that has resulted from years of abuse, more than I've ever experienced, which is the only reason I'm sitting here in a therapist's office being a therapist and he's out there without a home. It's not because I'm better. When my brain goes, oh, I have some facsimile of an understanding of what's true about him and what's true about me, I only feel love for him. Would I defend myself? Fuck yeah. The other day when I took my daughter to a park in Santa Monica where there's a lot of homeless people, there was a bit of an unhinged homeless person. Actually, it was not my daughter, it was my son. And one of them started walking weirdly aggressively in his direction. Guys, don't get me wrong. Trust me. I walked up between the two of them and made it super, super clear. I will beat the fuck out of you if you do anything that I think is a threat to my kid. I'm still a human being. I'm still a man. I'm still a father. Or I won't, if that's the best thing for my kid. If I can protect them without them seeing violence. Or if I could call on park personnel or a police officer to handle it, and they don't have to watch their dad be violent. If I can do something healthy for my kid, I will do that. Because it's not about my ego or violent feelings when I feel threatened or I feel that my family's threatened. That's not the point. In the moment, the lion's coming for you, fear and fight or flight, cortisol, adrenaline's great. The appropriate response. When you know what's true, it seems to present itself over and over and over that consciousness is inextricable from love. I am not capable of thinking about that unhoused gentleman without feeling love for him. And when I feel love for him, I also feel love for myself. I like myself and I love other people. This is simultaneously the most beautiful and generous thing and the most selfish thing you can possibly do. Because inhabiting that state gives me more than anything could ever give me on the face of the planet. It makes me stronger, healthier, faster, smarter. I will live longer. I will have more fun while I'm doing it. I will do more things that I want, and my kids will have better protection and better parenting, and my family will be better. I will have better sex. I will have better love. Everything will be better for me. And at the same time, it's simultaneously beautifully generous for everyone else. Why is that? I don't know. I'm just a therapist, guys. But it's cool, it's fun, it's great. Anyway, I think it's time to shut this one down. We started with what that thing was. I was trying to define it further, explain further how judgment is a function of dysregulation, which is a function of judgment, which is a function of separation from truth, which is a function of judgment. There are some parts of the same thing. Whatever it is, it's just fear. In the end, it's separation from consciousness. Because when you're in a conscious state, what's true just is what's true. You're not trying to negotiate with it, control it, obscure it, nothing. Just what's true is what's true. And then I rolled a little bit further than I intended to and shared with you that no matter how cynical I was and no matter how much I suffered throughout the first half of my life, it just seems to present over and over and over that conscious awareness seems to be inextricable from love, that love is consciousness. And whatever this is, whatever this reality is, the more I'm aware, the more love I feel. I don't mean romantic love. I mean just plain old deep, profound appreciation for the life and the presence of other living things, including an unhoused gentleman who was startled and behaved aggressively, slightly violently towards me. It's good for me. It's good for everybody. So I wish all of you consciousness. I wish all of you freedom from delusion. I wish all of you freedom from judgments of others, judgment of self. I wish freedom from dysregulation for all of you. And all of that just means I wish you conscious awareness and I wish you love. All right, you guys have a good day. I'll see you next time. Take care.
Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.